Hello, my name's Rusty Coones, and I have somebody with me that has tons of titles, and I'm going to have to read these things while I go. It's Laura Klock, the famous Laura Klock, first
Oh,
mother, daughter speed record holder at Bonneville, 195 plus miles an hour for all three of you, correct?
yeah.
I mean, she's been racing. She was on Bonneville for 6 years. She's one of the founders of Biker Bells, and they're into their 15th year. She's been nominated Grand Marshal at Sturgis. She was the first female women's team at the Motorcycle Cannonball Run, and she was a participant in the Biker Build-Off Series in 2007 with Brian and Clockworks.
Yep.
I'm sure there's a bunch more, but that's a lot right there. How
That's
you
some
doing?
fun stuff, huh? Hi, Rusty. Nice to see you.
I'll give you a minute to introduce yourself. So
Yeah.
look, you've got a lot to talk about here. So I think what we'll do is I wanted to kind of put it out there so people understand there's so much that you've done here, and we're going to hit on all those things. But first, let's go back early on with your first
Okay.
introduction to motorcycles. What was that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to give the credit to my dad. And just growing up in Wisconsin in the country, my dad rode motorcycles from a really young age too. And, one thing about my parents is they didn't tell us no. Like if we were interested in something, it's like, go figure it out. And I ended up parenting the same way. But so I started out on a little dirt bike in the country in Wisconsin. So I had a Suzuki 175, and it's really funny. Like in eighth grade, I was taking a photography class, and all of my pictures are of my dirt bike, like against a pine tree or in the woods. So I rode that thing everywhere. I mean, we lived in the country, so I'd ride it on the road, and if a car was coming, I'd hop down in the ditch because I didn't have my driver's license yet. So that's really where it started for me. It was just like a natural, it wasn't something I sought out. It was just part of my life. And I didn't realize till a much later date that how important it was in my life, that it stood for so many things. So when I got my driver's license, my dad, he had a Harley Softail, and he's like, you know how to ride, take it out on the road, And so I get on my dad's Softail, not intimidating at all, and just sort of learned really quickly, like, yeah, I know how to shift, I know how to balance, I know how to do all that. But I wasn't really confident, like in traffic and stopping. And so I sought out the motorcycle safety course. I was a little older when I finally took the course, and got my first Harley Davidson. But I'm a huge advocate for the course since then, because someone can show you like how to ride a motorcycle, but until you gain that confidence for yourself, then once I had that and I had those basic skills down, then I guess the rest is history, right?
So you
So that's
basically
where it
did
started.
so. From what I understand, you did so well with that course that they wanted to make you an instructor.
Well, that didn't happen until years later. I actually took the course in Wisconsin, got my first Harley, rode to Sturgis. I mean, I've only missed Sturgis twice in the last 26 years. So once was for a surgery I had for an illness I was dealing with, and the other was the birth of my grandson. So it was recently that I missed, but otherwise I was hooked. So I rode a Sportster to Sturgis from Wisconsin the first time I rode with my dad. So no, I love the course so much that when women would see me riding, I would always tell them to take the course. And so when Erica and Carly in South Dakota, you can get your driver's license when you're 14. I know that's kind of crazy, but it's the law still, including your motorcycle license.
That's
So
great.
when they started riding, I wanted them to take the course, and I found out here in South Dakota, where in Mitchell, where we were at the time, there wasn't a course in Mitchell. So I was getting frustrated because I wanted them to take it. I didn't want to just teach them how. And anyway, so this is kind of a theme you're going to hear. I'm like, well, what do you have to do to be an instructor around here? And so that led into being an instructor. I mean, I taught thousands of people through the class in a 10-year stretch there. It was on the weekends. And if I was around and we weren't traveling, I was teaching class. So
Now,
yeah, I did that for a while.
were you guys using the little 250s for
Yeah.
training? Yeah.
Yeah, little.
It's actually a
We had
perfect
mostly
bike.
like Kawasaki's and Suzuki, just little. I don't even know what they're called, but yeah, little bikes. Yeah,
That's smart though. You know, people
it
they're
is.
they don't know what they're doing. It's a lighter bike, easier to take, pick up and all that. So
It,
yeah, that was a good
it
idea.
is. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, it was
universally,
fun.
pretty much all of them do that. Most of the
Yeah.
places that train use those. Right on.
Yeah. So I did that for a lot of years. I mean, it was fun. I remember one Memorial weekend, we were on a poker run and I had both my daughters in front of me and we were riding and a bunch of their friends, like 5 or 6 of their friends. And I had a moment because I was in the back. I'm like, I taught all these kids how to ride motorcycle, so it was just moments like that where you're like, they're
Cool.
doing good and you're, watching them do all the things that, because the course is very, I mean, step by step, and you have to master, one step before you move on to the next step, which I love because you're building on those basics. And once you have those basics down, then if you decide to go race or not, or ride on the back, even, it makes you a safer passenger
Yeah,
once you learn the basics of riding motorcycles. So yeah, I've had a couple moments like that where
that's cool.
I taught a lot of kids around here. Yeah.
Now, was that before you were involved with the 2007 Biker Build-Off Series?
No, it was after, actually,
After?
when I actually became an instructor. So I moved my daughters to South Dakota,
Mhm.
from Wisconsin, and actually to work at Clockworks. I came here for a job, so I'm in South Dakota now still, and so are they. And Brian at the time had a little motorcycle shop in a garage, and I think the Discovery Channel had approached him before and he said no, because you couldn't even turn around in this little garage. Well, when I got there and started working there, and Brian and I were friends at that time, and we had moved in, we were just moving into a bigger shop. And so the Discovery Channel called again. And so he said yes. And I mean, I started working with him in end of 2005, beginning of 2006. And then we were on Biker Build Off in that at that time, 06, 07. And we decided to build a bagger because Brian, his little shop in a small town, he worked on anything that came through the door. And a lot of what was coming through the door for him was his dad's friends and his dad. And so they were all riding touring bikes. And at the time, they weren't cool, they were grandpa's bike or geezer glides. And anyways, he wanted to make one go fast, and we ended up putting an S&S motor in it. It was a road glide fairing, but it had a S&S 124. But it looked like a Harley. Everyone related it to that. I had the Harley frame and everything. So we had this idea to put a wheelie bar on it. Not sure if we were going to go the drag strip or not, but just to draw attention. Like if you have to walk around it and you trip over this wheelie bar, it might make you look a little closer. Like, why does it have a wheelie bar?
Yeah.
And so it truly was marketing ideas. And one day we were sitting in the office and just, maybe we should go race it. And I said, well, I'll look into it. Let's figure out what we can do. And the idea of Bonneville came up, and who doesn't, I mean, if you're any sort of motorhead, who doesn't want to go to Bonneville even just to watch at some point? And so I got looking into it, and sure enough, we could race it. There wasn't a class for baggers, but we could fit it into a class. And we happened to have, honestly, putting me on it was a marketing idea because I'm a woman, and this is a woman's never raced this kind of bike before. And really nobody's why would you take your touring bike with saddlebags down the Bonneville Salt Flats, right? So we won the Biker Build Off, and then it was only weeks later I found myself on the starting line of the Bonneville Salt Flats.
That's
And we had
crazy.
no idea, what I could do, what the bike could do. And I looked over, I'll never forget that day because everyone was watching, because the type of bike, and I was one of 4 women at that time. And now at Bonneville, by the time we were done, they had an actual, they would get all the women together and take a photo because there'd be 30 of them. but I was one of four back then.
Wow.
So no one had raced that kind of bike before, all of that stuff. And I look over and I see my daughters watching me, and they were 11 and 13 at the time, and just thought, oh man, here we go. And twisted the throttle and took off. And when Brian tells the story, he puts the sound effects and everything in, because that bike, I mean, it's still around. It's up at Clockworks, but that bike, I always said it growled. It just has the best sound. And he said a couple of people thought I blew it up, and he was like, no, she's going for it. So I qualified. Then you have to do a pass in the opposite direction. And in our first two passes on the Salt Flats, we had a land speed record.
Wow.
So
now, was that an out of the box 124? Or was there
pretty much it had their B2 heads on it. I don't, you probably know more about so it had their B2 racing heads on it, and of course had been tuned by them and stuff. By S&S was a good partner in that with us. And the other thing, we had carbon fiber wheels on it and ceramic bearings and just some things that kind of made it roll a little better, roll a little faster. So I think all of those things lined up. And again, it wasn't a bagger class, so it was like a partially streamlined because it had a fairing. We left the saddlebags on it. So, but honestly, what happened from that, I reported and I want to say, I think it was 146 miles an hour. So it wasn't crazy high speeds, and I had a lot of guys say, oh, I do that all day long on the road, and I'm like, it's not the same, you guys. It's not the same at all. And no, you don't. And if you did, maybe you hit it for a second. You have to hold your top speed for a mile
That's right.
I had to go that fast for a mile. So, but I don't get into those kind of pissing matches, but I'm like, okay, well, come on out. And some people did come out, but what I reported and what I felt was the faster I went, the more it felt like the front end of the bike was lifting up. And so that's where on the way home, Brian had his hand out the window, like, how can we push down on the front of the bike? And that's where our flare windshield design came from. The shape of it with the hip area. And oh man, it's a long story, but we ended up in a wind tunnel in North Carolina with no money to do it, that's not. And we had a rapid prototype machine, back then now you can get them on your desktop. Like I could go buy one for a couple $1,000, right? But back then that was like a $60,000 machine that they were letting us use for the build off, because we had a lot of prototype parts on the motorcycle, like a gauge housing and some stuff like that that we pulled right out of the machine and scuffed them up and painted them and put it on there. Well, our first flare windshield was 3 pieces off the rapid prototype machine. And we smoothed it all out and spray painted it. And that's what we had at the wind tunnel. And what we learned was, first of all, it worked. I mean, that moment I was on the bike in the wind tunnel, so I didn't know what was going on in the control room. But when we, they blow the wind over and they blow smoke over and see where everything's going, and they record, you're actually you're on like a pad that's recording down force and up force and side to side. Your wheels are strapped around the wheels, so the bike is free to lean, and and then they blow the wind over you and see what happens, but they're recording all of that. And so I got done with the pass and I got off the bike, walked into the control room, and Brian was crying and everyone else was like cheering, and because it worked. I mean, it worked.
So basically that windshield design put more downforce on that front wheel, correct?
It does. And all the years, 13 years I installed those on people's motorcycles at events, and Clockworks is still doing that. We're, still enjoying success from that collaboration. And never once would a guy or gal walk up to you and say, I need more downforce, because that's not,
they don't even think about it. They don't go to speed.
It flows the wind, like it goes over the hips and pushes down, and then the flip kicks it up over your head, which is really what they care about. But they don't realize until they go for a test ride to feel that difference of that downforce. Like you know, you go out to pass the semi, or you go, you know, you're going down the highway, the faster you're going, the more it's pushing your bike down. And so we found out really the only way to even explain that to anyone was to let them try it. So that's where the try it before you buy it program came from. And they still do that today. So it was really cool to be a part of all of that. We had a great team of people, you know, from help from the NASCAR community, even with, you know, the other thing, there's a little bit of a modification on the bottom of that fairing. It was a little flatter to let the air flow across the bottom better. But I personally learned a ton about aerodynamics. I still think of it, you know, when I'm out doing different things. And you know, once you're going that fast, you're learning body position matters. Every little thing matters. However, the road glide fairing has about as much mass on the front as a NASCAR truck, is what they told us. So when we went to the wind tunnel, we had skinny little saddlebags and all this stuff, you know, that you could swap out and see, is that better? Is that better? One little thing that worked was we had a cardboard piece to deflect air down a little bit instead of coming up in my face under the fairing, and that helped, you know. So each pass you changed one thing to see what was better. And the bags, or even really how I sat, didn't matter because that fairing's so big. So anyways, the second year that we went, Erica, my oldest daughter, was old enough. We had the prototype flare windshield, and on that, so I rode the road glide again. Erica rode a little Beal Blast and got a record in her first two passes, going 100 miles an hour, you know, but it was a record. And then we became the first mother-daughter team in history to hold records at the same time. And then Carly wasn't even old enough yet. So when Carly was 14, then she was able to go. So by the third year, we were all on different bikes, but we each set a record. And it wasn't even us pursuing that. We wouldn't have known to pursue that. We had a historian, her name is Landspeed Louise. And recently she wrote a book and included us in it too, but she's a historian. She's the one that approached us. She came up to me one day and she's like, you know, there's a lot of mother-daughter or father-daughter teams, father-son teams. She goes, but I don't think I've ever seen a mother-daughter team, and definitely not a mother-daughter-daughter team. So that year, all three of us set records. And, you know, so everyone asked, I think you even asked, like, do you still hold records, this or that? Honestly, I don't know. I should look it up, because records kind of come and go.
Sure.
But when you're the first in history to do something, to me, that, you know, hopefully it inspires other people, which I think it did. I think we brought some attention, you know, to the Salt Flats, and definitely that you can, I mean, they even have I used to tell people they have a run what you brung class. Like, you can ride your road bike there and tape up all your stuff and go do a pass. If your goal is just to say, I rode my bike on the Bonneville Salt Flats, you can do that, you know, but a lot of people didn't. I didn't know that until we researched
it. They have to wear the leathers and all that.
Yeah, you got to have the gear. You got to have the gear, but you know, but the rules are not as strict as they are to do the other stuff. Sure. So then every year at the end, we would say, what are we going to do next year? And what are we going to do next year? And I tell you, I could tell you stories for hours because some amazing things happened, you know, from Carly. I mean, as a racer, you have goals. Okay. I want to get a record. I want to go 150. I want to go 175. I want to go 200, you know, so we had all of those goals, and Carly sort of accidentally went 150. Like, we put her on this little Dyna. We called it Dynamite, having no idea she would go that fast. I mean, she could barely touch on the thing, right? And she ends up going over 150. So now Erica's upset because she's older and I want to go 150, and she's only on a motorcycle. She still had a land speed record at like 136 or something. It was still a record, but her bike wasn't capable of going 150. So now we had this dilemma. The only way that she could get hurt, you get a medallion. was if Carly borrowed her bike. And she did it, but she, so we left it up to her to decide, but she did it on the last day. So Eric had like 2 chances to get this done and she got it done. So,
Yeah.
and then they were like, we don't ever want to compete with each other again. So then ultimately we went on to, we wanted to go 200. That was the goal. And I think it was 161 is the fastest that I went on the bagger. And so it still was dubbed the world's fastest bagger. And then people came, people started bringing baggers, right? But they started not looking like baggers anymore. You know what I mean? Like the Road Glide, you could still ride it on the street, where if you're getting into a full blown body kit race bike, so I still feel like we kind of authentically took a bagger, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but to go 200, obviously you got to get on a bike that's going to go 200. And so we got this BMW S1000 RR pretty much out of the box, to practice on, because you have to license to go 200. So you have to do a pass at 125 and a pass at 150 and a pass at 175. And you get your little license. And so we've got a bunch of pictures of that. And so we were all sharing this bike to learn how to go 200, basically. So, but we never dreamed that we would get as close as we did. So, and it came down to some really cool things like the body position, basically. So the girls were going back and forth and back and forth, and you wait a long time in line in between, so I was just being their mom. Like I was holding the umbrella and getting them water and just watching it, because it was so fun. Because when we're on separate motorcycles, we weren't always together all day, like I might be doing a return pass and Carly's, so we each had our own little team person. And which I always tell these guys I'm still friends with all of them. And it's like, I not only trusted you with my life, I trusted you with my kids' lives, so that means, that means a lot. Anyways, I got to be with them and watch them, and, Carly'd come rolling in and say, try this, and Erica would go try it. And so I didn't even race this whole day, right? So we're in the hotel room that night, and I said, you know what, girls, it was so fun just watching you today, just watching you figure this out. Like, maybe I don't even need to do this, like you guys go, maybe you'll get it, you're getting so close. They're already over. I mean, and once they were getting over 190 miles an hour, like I've never been 190 at this point. I didn't know how to coach them any further. I'm like, you're blazing the trail, just keep doing it. And they both were like, well, we can't be the mother, daughter without the mom, so the next morning they told me all their tricks, all the stuff they figured out. Literally, they were changing their body position right before the mile. So we're going 190 miles an hour, and they were putting their butt up on the tail section of the bike,
Okay.
and you could feel it lift, right? It changed it. And so first of all, I'm like, you're moving around at 190 miles an hour? Like, what the hell, And so they're telling me, and then they were telling me they had learned about the bike, like exactly when to shift it, Mom. You got to shift it right before you hit the rev limiter, blah, blah, blah. So they're telling me all this. And the next morning, they're standing next to me, and I was in line. I think it was like the third one to go that morning. And I took off and I shift when they told me to, and I'm like, okay, here you go. I had never put my butt up in the air on a bike before, like literally lifting and setting on the tail section, right? So I did it, and I felt it, and I'm like, holy crap, like I'm hauling, I've never been this fast before. And so I exited the course and asked one of the guys, so I knew. And I went 196.797. I went faster than both of them, and they were mad at me.
Yeah.
But so we never, and then years after that, several years in a row, the Salt Flats, it happened this past year too. if there's too much water, racing doesn't happen. It is a dried up lake bed. And, you know, and then life happened and the girls graduated from high school and now they're moms and I'm a grandma. You know, we didn't get to go back and finish it. But Land Speed Louise told us we're the first mother-daughter trio in history to set records at the same time at the same event, and we've all been over 195. So
That's a lot, man.
so yeah, so I mean, there's a million stories I could tell, but I'll let you ask questions. But yeah, I mean, really, well, think about it. They were in high school, and then Erica was in college those last couple of years, and literally doing homework on the Salt Flats in between race passes. Team Clockworks grew. We had another mother-daughter with us, one of the employees' wives and his daughter. And then Brian ultimately raced and set a couple records. And then we can get into helping with horsepower, but we actually, I'll tell you more about helping with horsepower, but we teamed up with Lloyd Greer. He now owns Lloyd's Motorworks. Yeah. And he wanted to do the program at Pine Bush High School in New York. And those kids built a race bike under Lloyd's direction, and we raced it for them. So those group of high school, second chances high school kids got to go to the Salt Flats with us on a motorcycle they built. And I was their pilot, and we set some records for them.
That was a beautiful bike. Yeah. Lloyd's, I've used their product.
Did you see that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
He's great. He's
great
a good
craftsmanship. That bike was incredible. Mm-hmm. You know, what did you hit with that bike anyway? All three of you guys rode that bike, didn't you?
Well, so we had some trouble with the high speed wobble, and I hadn't experienced that personally. So I kept doing passes, like trying to get through it, you know, because everything you learn about a wobble is don't do anything sudden. Sometimes you can speed, sometimes you can power through it, sometimes you can't. And I kept trying to, and I couldn't. And I mean, literally, I would get off the bike and I'd be in tears because I wanted to make these kids proud so bad. And I was hitting something I hadn't experienced before. And so I went up to Brian and I'm like, do you think you could just do a pass just to tell me, like, I don't even know what to do. I try to power through it and it's freaking scary. And so he did a pass and he came back and he's like, don't you ever try to power through something like that again, you know? And I'm like, well, I didn't know, I've never experienced it before. I knew the bagger and I knew, you know, I mean, you experience some things. I remember one of my scariest passes, Jay Allen of the Broken Spoke was out there, and because he races too. And I was taking a walk because I was shook up, you know, and he's like, what's going on? And I told him, and he goes, well, think about it this way. You just grew as a rider and a racer. Like every time you experience something and get past it that you haven't done before, you grow, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not ready to be positive yet, but you know, because you wait so long to get your pass. And then if something goes wrong, it's just frustrating, you know, like, could I have done it different? Or dang it, it's the same problem we're dealing with on this motorcycle, you know? So we experienced a lot of stuff over that period of time. So Brian did a pass, and then we were able to all collaborate on some feedback, and we ended up, they had kind of a full fender over the front tire and it wasn't letting the air. So we cut that and made some changes, and it helped a lot. And so ultimately Brian ended up, and it was just a really great story on teamwork, because, you know, even if it didn't matter if it was me, we just wanted a record for the team.
Sure.
And I think he went 171 ultimately there. You know, I don't know his 0.77, you know, I know mine, I don't know his, but yeah, so we got a record for those kids, and I keep in touch with a few of them. I mean, those are once in a lifetime, life-changing experiences, you know, that you don't forget. I always called it extreme parenting, extreme product testing, extreme team building, you know, the Salt Flats in general, because it was all of those things, you know, as we grew, as the company grew, the flare windshield happened, and we got a design patent and it works. And, you know, it really launched Clockworks. I mean, Brian had set the foundation with the custom bikes he was doing and stuff. And then we got our other parts going and, you know, but as all of that grew, our team that was going to the Salt Flats grew too. So that's why, I mean, there's just a million stories. Like one year my dad was with, and we were racing a Triumph trike, Brian was, for, you know, working together with Motor Trike. And we went around the pits and borrowed leathers and all this stuff and registered my dad, and he got to do a pass on that trike. So, and then the guy I borrowed the leathers from, you know, I'm sizing up these guys. I'm like, I know this is weird, but can I borrow your leathers? And so he's waiting. He's like, okay, that's all great. I'm glad everything went well. Can I have my leathers back? You know, so anyways, just lots of good stories.
So the windshields, they were born out of the racing?
Yeah, they were.
Not
and
the other way around. That's what it was, just kind of
Mhm.
accidental that you were developing the windshields for downward force.
Yeah, I mean, the
Sonata.
bagger, like Brian was wanting to do performance bagger stuff. So he was kind of ahead of, you know, he was ahead of that curve a little bit, because you know how it exploded. Because he was working on his dad's bikes and his dad's friends' bikes. And then, yeah, so it really came from biker build off. Hey, let's race it, just to kind of extend. Because a lot of people would do the build off, and then you either, you know, what do you do with that? Like, you got to keep that momentum going. And as a small company, we were just trying to think of ways that we could keep that going. You know, we were going to be on TV, and we're a tiny little company in South Dakota. So we were really good at marketing together. Anyways, yeah, it came, we raced the bike, and then it came out of a need to make it safer and go faster.
Right on.
So that's where it was born.
Let's move on to
Yeah.
Biker Bells. Are you one of the founders of Biker Bells?
I am. So I got a phone call. So Tony Woodruff of the Woodruff family of the Sturgis Buffalo Chip. I have become really good friends with her over the years, but I was approached as a lady rider and a woman in the industry, like, what could we do to get like a home for women in Sturgis, like a women's day? And so we, you know, there was a group of about 6 of us, and we all just kind of shared ideas, and we did it. And you know, it's just it's always the Tuesday of Sturgis, and we, you know, we've changed the way the route goes, but we do a ride, and we do I don't know, we did a panel sometimes, invited other women and in the industry, you know, so riders could ask questions, and just had a lunch thing. And now we've sort of turned it so that we end up at the Buffalo Chip. And so we start in Deadwood in the morning, we ride to the Chip, and then now there's like a whole day of, gosh, there was a leather punching class, a welding class. I mean, just, you know, or not class necessarily, but kind of. I mean, if you've never welded before, they had it set up so that you could weld. And we have a women's motorcycle show now, and all that kind of stuff. So obviously it takes a lot of women. It's not just me, but I'm really proud to be a founding member of it. We're in our 15th year. So that makes me feel old, but also not a lot of things endure sometimes, you know, like, so it's cool that it's morphed and changed a little bit, but it's cool that it's endured the test of time, and it's grown every year. So
Right on. And then I see nominated Grand Marshal at Sturgis.
That was kind of it was a surprise. I mean, Jessie Combs was the first woman to be the Grand Marshal at Sturgis. So, and then Jody Perowitz a couple of years ago. And so, you know, I was aware that there hasn't been a ton of women that have been the Grand Marshal of Sturgis. And so recently I did a Helping with Horsepower bike rebuild program for the city of Sturgis. They had approached me, and we worked hand in hand with Mitchell Technical College Power Sports program here in South Dakota. Chris Dagan leads that program, and he was one of the guys that I trusted with my life. I mean, he's been an instructor there for 10 years now. He used to work at Klockworks with us, but he's been an instructor now. So we we had a short deadline and we were going to do some pretty major motor work to this bike. So we took it right into their classroom and did the whole design. And so they got the students got pretty cool real world experience, And anyways, during that time, I don't think one led to the other, but during that time I got a phone call. It was actually, my birthday's in October and it was the weekend of my birthday. I get this phone call saying, "Hey, we just had a meeting and, would you like to be our Grand Marshal?" I'm like,
Great.
yes.
That's a good honor
I mean,
right there.
you don't say no to that, do you? Like, I don't know why you're
Oh,
picking me, but yeah, I'll do it.
yeah, and you're in great
So
company. Jesse and Jody and
yeah,
now you. I mean, top
yeah, just
top
as far as the
riders,
women and
top racers and top riders.
yeah, it's and Sturgis holds a really special place to me because even before I ever worked at Clockworks or, before I was in the industry, I was a motorcycle rider and, put lots of miles on and had done the Sturgis Rally a million different ways, like, with my dad, with friends, with girls only, with couples, and riding on past it to Wyoming or Montana. You know what I mean? Like we always, every year, I even bartended out there one year. So it was always my thing that I did in the summer. So, my kids always went to their dads and that was my week, my vacation. And it's part of our family history. So I can definitely, when I looked up what Grand Marshal means, it's to be a brand ambassador for the event. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Cause a lot of people have the wrong perception of what the rally is. And you can find just about anything there that, the good and the bad, right? But it's
Yeah.
not all bad. It's
Oh, hell
uh
no.
no, and it's where people from all over the world come together to celebrate motorcycles, like and to ride, it's some of the most beautiful riding I've ever done.
Beautiful. Yes.
And you can party, you can go to concerts, you can not party. I mean, you can whatever. You can camp, you can stay in a hotel, you can stay in a cabin. I mean, it's to me, it's one of the best rallies. So
To me, it is
it's
too.
easy for
I
me to say
agree.
good things about it,
No,
So
it's a great place. It's been going on a long time.
yeah,
First time I was there was a long, long time ago, and I was amazed at how big it was. I mean, it
yeah,
was wall to wall,
yeah.
and it's still the coolest one. I like it better. Some of the other ones, are cool, but they're not like so tightly compacted with everything together. They're
Right.
spread out
I
too
agree.
much sometimes.
Yep. Yep. And
Yeah.
it feels like you're in the city or something where there's, yeah, all sorts of, no, I totally agree. And I remember the first time I went, okay, so we didn't have the internet. Like, I'm in my mid 50s here. I'm not, so the first time I went, just sitting on Main Street and watching all types of people and all types of motorcycles, it was like creative overload for me. It was like Googling custom motorcycles and stuff. So it really opened my mind to what you could do to your motorcycle and how you could make it yours and express yourself. And I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So
You see
I
every
don't think a lot of people remember like before the internet, you know what I mean?
yeah, you've got everything you can think of there. Everything. It's amazing.
Yep.
Even got these guys with the big sumo suits on with the in the cages
Yeah.
wrestling, and I mean, just you name it, it's there.
Oh, I know.
But anyhow, let's
One
go
of my
on
friends that
to
I brought, go ahead.
your motorcycle cannonball run.
Oh, well, so Chris Summer Simmons, she's a great friend of mine. Her husband is Pat Simmons of the Doobie Brothers. She was, and we were all motormaids together. Athena Ransom, she's a good friend, and Toastacia Boyd, she was along, she was filming it. Anyways, Chris was doing the cannonball, and I, as Clockworks, wanted to sponsor her. I'm like, what do you need? And then next thing you know, she's like, well, actually, I need a team. And so yeah, I was gone for like 2 weeks, but we went from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, all the way to the Santa Monica Pier, and it was
Wow.
all 1915 and older motorcycles. So she was on a 1914 Harley Davidson. She named it Effie after Effie Hotchkiss, who was the first female to go from one ocean to the other. And
Huh.
one of the things that Effie did historically was she took ocean water from one ocean in a bottle in her bike and dumped it in the other when she got there, and Chris did that.
That's cool.
And so she carried a little vial of ocean water from one ocean to the other. And so I didn't ride in that, but I was part of the only female team on there, and it was the first one. And Chris did great. Like, I can't imagine. I mean, we saw a lot of stuff on that trip, as far as you have to imagine going, all of those miles over all those days at about 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like, that's all the faster those
And
bikes
what, with
go.
only a
And
rear
so,
brake? With only
yeah,
a
I don't think she had any brakes. Yeah. And so every single night, Athena and I would have to do maintenance on Effie, and we would talk to her and, make sure. And Chris would tell us the things that, because we dealt with altitude changes and weather and, those
Mhm.
bikes. Like, I remember one pit stop, Effie kept just spitting out her push rod, like she just
Yeah.
wasn't going to do it, but your goal on those rides is to finish each day and not get put on the trailer, right? So Athena and I got to be at the back of all the pack. And so we would try to help people get their bikes going so we didn't have to load them up. So they called
Sure.
us the road angels. And then oh my gosh, what were they? It was the Reaper. If the Reaper came and picked you up, that means the angels couldn't fix you. So it just, and the cool thing about old bikes is they're simple,
Yeah,
like it's just simple. And so
very
you can
simple.
see
Yeah.
sometimes what's wrong, like something bends, and by the end of that ride, like some people's bikes, they were held together with pop cans and wires and duct tape and just to finish this ride. But it was just an amazing once in a lifetime experience. And Chris knows, but I always thank her for that opportunity, because it just, I don't know. First of all, you're on the way back roads all the way across the country. And then just to get to touch and help with so many different motorcycles, it was just an awesome learning experience too. And she finished.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think she was, yeah, it was awesome. We got her across the finish
How many
line.
people run that run?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Ha, well, just a guess.
Her number was 89. I don't know if that has anything to do with if there were that many.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I'd have to look it up. I'm
Wow.
sorry.
That's a bunch if they had that many. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a decent group. I mean, I want to say there was 50. So,
Mhm.
and old Indians, I mean, plus the other thing is you spend 2 full weeks with these people across the country, right? And
Mhm.
so that motorcycle that we just did for the city of Sturgis went to the Mecum auction in January. And one of the guys that was riding an old Indian on that ride came up, and I got to see him again. I mean, we became friends, so you're
That's
like
cool.
family.
Right on.
But it was cool.
Right on, Laura. So anyhow, I think we're
Yeah.
wrapping it up. Do you got anything else you want to talk about before we close it
Um,
out?
well, no, I mean, helping with horsepower, I'll throw that in there really quick. So the bike rebuild program came from just a real desire of seeing, what motorcycles had done in my life and my daughter's lives, setting goals and achieving them and pushing yourself and not being afraid to say what you felt when you were riding, as far as it did this. I don't know why. What can I do different? How can I fix it if something's wrong? And then teaching too. So the Abbott House is a residential treatment center for girls in Mitchell. So if
Oh,
girls are
nice.
in ages 7 to 17, okay. So if a 7-year-old is in a treatment center, you can imagine what her life's been to this point.
Yeah.
And they came one day to Clockworks and wanted, soliciting donations. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could write you a $10,000 check. I mean, we weren't at that point yet because this was real soon. And I said, I wish I could teach them how to ride motorcycle or teach them, you know, something. And so I always say it's one thing to have an idea and it's another to have a place like that that's willing to try all sorts of new things to reach those girls. And so that ultimately I ended up writing a curriculum in the kitchen and along with my insurance agent, I'm like, how can I do this? I want to do this. And so we're using a motorcycle as a tool to teach life lessons. So basically the motorcycle comes in, it's usually a donation, you know, we walk around it. What do we need to change? What do we want it to look like? You know, so really we're teaching them how to treat their life that way. Like I can change it. I can see how I want it to be and make it so, you know, and so then we're hands-on all the way through. We tear it down, we take off the old stuff. I solicit donations and we customize this motorcycle. So I'm in there right now. It's the seventh motorcycle we've done with them. And then we raffle it off and it raises money for them and for Abbott House. And so, you know, that's where that all happened. And along the way, we added horses. So horsepower to us is motorcycles and horses.
That's cool.
I've just always had love for horses. The Abbott House girls go out to the ranch, and we also do equine therapy for
wow,
adults with disabilities. And as most people know, I'm not at Klockworks anymore, which is fine. We're all good friends. And so I actually have an on-farm creamery with a mini golf course and a petting farm, and I bottle milk and make cheese, but I'm still doing the bike rebuild program. And now I have 2 little grandbabies. They're going to be 4 this year, and I give them rides in my sidecar. So they love it.
Hey,
so I've slowed down a little bit speed wise, but not anything else. I guess I stay pretty busy.
For your creamery, do you have a website? Do you want to give us or anything?
I do. So it's farmlifecreamery.com, and then helping with horsepower is helpingwithhorsepower.com. So you can always see what we're doing, where we're at on both of those things. And of course, all the Facebook and all. Carly, my youngest daughter, keeps telling me I need to do TikTok, but I like to watch TikTok, but I haven't figured it out yet.
I enjoy that. Yeah. All right. Well, look, Laura, it's been great talking to you. You got a heck of a story.
I gave you more than you wanted, I bet.
No, absolutely not. I wish we could cover more, but for people that didn't know you, I think you really put a lot out there that they can run with, and all they have to do is look online. There's a lot of stuff about you online. And that one documentary, is it called is it Klocked?
Yeah, it's called Klocked, Women with Horsepower. And that in itself was a cool experience. But Michelle Bauer Carpenter, she put that together for us, and we could have never paid for what she did for us. And it's so funny because when we were doing it, I was just so humbled that she would tell our story so well. And she tells the racing story. But I remember saying to her, like, you don't understand, like, my grandkids are going to watch this someday. Like, you did this for our family, you know, which she didn't, but she did. And now that's happening. They're not old enough to understand it yet, but I have grandkids now and I can't wait, you know, for them to see what their moms did.
I'll tell you what, that documentary is so well put together. Unbelievable. I mean, my hat's off to her for that great work. And if you haven't seen it,
that was all her.
You need to look at it. Klocked. I mean, it is amazing. They're out on Bonneville. They got cameras on some of the bikes, and they're showing the whole story from start to finish.
Yeah, she did a good job.
Should be a movie someday. Should be a movie.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. She did a great job though. And she made it available so you can just watch it online. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
I watched it and I loved it. Really great.
Good.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you very much for the time. And I'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Bye.